Welcome to the latest edition of the Cranky Curmudgeon's Corner. My name is Paul Thomas, and this edition we are going to be talking about cults. With us tonight, Marilee Rendulich, Doug Heinrichs, Daniel Thomas. Welcome, panel. When I hear people express their complete amazement over the MAGA devotion to the biggest asshole in the history of the world, my comeback is, if you can explain to me why 909 people, including 304 children, died after drinking cyanide-laced Flavor Aid, I'll easily articulate the nature of the MAGA phenomenon. So we'll start with that easy question. What do you think created the belief system that accommodated the mass murder suicide, which had parents forcing their children to drink what they knew to be deadly poison in Guyana in 1978? Dan, you were born in 1978, so you don't remember any of this happening in real time, but I'm sure you did some research on it. So what do you think it was that caused them to do that?
Well,
And
as part of, am I still on? Pino's stepping on the microphone. Can you
no,
hear
you're
me?
good. We hear you. Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Well, okay. I was born in 79. Don't add an extra year on. I'm already far enough.
Okay.
Um, so as part of the research, I did discover that not everybody willingly drank the Flavor Aid. A lot of people were forced to drink the Flavor Aid. And I don't think the MAGA people are quite that far yet where they're going to be willing to murder their children. A lot of them wonder why their children won't talk to them anymore. And I'm sure that's Hillary Clinton's fault or something. But um, I think that it's once you have a religious grasp on something, whether that's right or wrong, it's really hard to actually walk away from it. And they are doing a lot of mental gymnastics to justify their behavior. Like, I don't know, the economy is terrible, but they can spend $4,000 on NFTs so that they can get a piece of the suit, and $400 on really ugly gold-plated sneakers that just dropped this week. Like, the economy is not doing that bad if they have this money to do this, but they've just convinced themselves of such, and there is no way to reach them while they're still actively in it. So I think a lot of them will be shocked out of it at some point or another when it starts to hurt them personally. But until they realize that the movement is actually hurting them and bad for them, they won't. And that some of the people in Jonestown never snapped out of it. There were a lot of other people who did. There are Jonestown survivors. There were the people who escaped. Um, I think Jim Jones' kid, if I remember correctly, one of his sons, like one of his biological sons, got out and does not have respect or love or anything for his father now. So there were people who managed to break free. They just Not all of the MAGA people are there yet.
You mentioned about people breaking out of it when they get hurt personally. So I think you're considering the people who were arrested on January 6th for the January 6th involvement were hurt personally, and so
Yeah,
a lot of those people have broken away. That's true.
yeah, the
Merrill
ones
Lee,
who wondered where their pardons were, because he had plenty of time to pardon them and he didn't.
right. Merrill Lee, you were a resident of California, and the I forget what it was, the People's Temple or whatever, was a California-based organization before they moved to Guyana. So, what's your recollection of what happened down there with that suicide with the Kool Aid?
I only knew of it as after the Kool-Aid incident. And, I just recall it. Um, I had to look it up again too, because I couldn't quite remember all the details. But yeah, they were given too many choices, drink it or die by gunshot, right? Many of them don't. So I think a lot of them chose to drink it. But um, in any event. So the question is, why do people do this? And I think if they get caught up for whatever their needs are into this charismatic leader, they abdicate all sense of self. They do what they're told. They, their own independent thought seems to dissolve in many ways, so that even they don't value their life, they don't value their children, their spouses. Everything's up for grabs, and it's just you hear positive cults. You only hear about mind control, brainwashing, negative cult. So, unless I'm wrong there, I have never heard of any. So it's
You've never
it
heard of
doesn't
any positive cults? Is that what you're saying?
No, have you?
No. Oh, no.
Yeah, it's it always follows some real idiosyncratic or actually criminal thread, a lot of them, or psychotic thread. Did you guys ever hear of Heaven's Gate?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah, the Helly Bop people.
Mhm.
That isn't far from here, where that went down, and they all drank it. There was nobody standing outside with guns, and I think they thought they were going to jump on a comet. So guilty.
Yeah, well, the aliens were going to beam them up somehow, or
Somehow.
That's right.
Okay, Doug. Marilee asked a good question. Why did the people do this? So
Well, I think the pathway in is very diverse. I mean, people come in for their own reasons, and there's something dissatisfying in their life. Their life is going terribly. There's some problem. There's some emotional issue. I mean, it could be a whole range of things. But once they get funneled in, I think the process gets very uniform. They're removed from other influences. I mean, that's part of the brainwashing approach, right? They're cut off. In the case of these guys, quite literally in the jungle, right? You're cut off. You have one source of input, and you're given very simple and very absolute answers, which I think are very comforting to people who are confused about what went wrong with their life. So and I think this is part of Trump's appeal. I mean, he's so simplistic that, and he portrays that as strength. If you give a nuanced answer to what we should do, then you're waffling and you're weak. If you're strong, you're going to have a very simple, direct answer. And I think that's extremely appealing to people. And so they get caught in. And then once they're in it, of course, and you're right, it becomes, for some people, it remains voluntary. For a lot of people, it's not voluntary anymore. And for some people, they would love to get out, but they've invested too much of their life and themselves in this. It's sort of like putting good money after bad. You just keep, you don't want to, you went in because your life was not going well. And now you have to admit that you spent all this time in some crazy outfit. So I think a lot of people stay with it just because it's too painful to admit they were that far off base.
Sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And I think the other, you say, why don't we ever hear about positive cults? I think part of it is the very word cult carries a negative connotation. So if it's positive, we don't call it a cult. We give it some other name, benevolent brotherhood or something. I mean, we'll come up with some other
Religion.
Well,
religion.
yeah.
We'll get
Me,
to that later
not
on.
always a positive word either. But you're absolutely right. A number of us spent our high school in an institution run by a group of men who separated you from the world, who told you should never have sex or reproduce again, because some guy who some other people later claimed they saw him rise from the dead was the savior of the world, and so we should all live this way. Now, if you take that out of the fact that we all know that's Christianity, that's as crazy as most cults, right? But we don't call it that.
And I think another thing to add on to what you're saying about people not getting out, a lot of times it's just they're too embarrassed to admit they were wrong.
Absolutely.
Okay, do you have any Trump supporters in any of your social circles? And have you ever managed to engage in political discourse with them? If so, how did that go? Doug, I'll let you start out with that one.
Well, sadly, I have in my family a number of Trump supporters, but my extended family, not my immediate family. But there is no political dialogue because you can't discuss something if you disagree about the basic facts of the matter. So, and I think the problem with a lot of the Trumpian people is they simply deny the facts. So it's not like we can talk about our interpretation of the facts or what are the implications of the facts, or it just, well, that didn't happen. Of course, Trump had the biggest crowds at his inauguration. We all know that, right? And he won the election and da, 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 da. So it breaks down at the most basic level of human communication. What did we all see happen? We can't agree on that. There's nothing more to say. And so I think it doesn't go very far in my experience.
Okay, Dan, nothing more to say if it's you can't agree on the fundamental facts.
Well, that is true. In order to have an actual dialogue, there has to be an agreed upon set of facts. Water is wet and you need to drink it to live. And their attitude of being contrarian about literally everything and doing whatever dear leader says it's creepy. I don't have a lot of Trump people in my social circle. Most of my social circle consists of middle-aged gay men, and those who are Trump supporters understand that they should be ashamed of it, so they don't advertise it. That comes out later, and that's when I tend to cut the ties. So yeah, I don't bother engaging in the discourse because I know it's just going to be counterproductive and frustrating. So I just write those people off and move on because we don't agree on a shared set of facts. And if I don't agree on a shared set of facts with you and I don't hold the same values as you, I am all about diversity. I like being challenged. I like having differing opinions, but you have to be arguing from the same set of facts. Like, I'm a Hillary guy. I can talk to Bernie people. I'm fine with that. I will argue. I will leave that conversation still friends because we agree on a shared set of facts.
Okay, Marilee, do you have any people that you interact with that are not that are of the Trump persuasion, and how do you do that?
I am not very well. I've not been very successful. So much like, you have all explained, we just don't go there. I mean, I did lose a very good friend over it very early on, mainly because went from libertarian to evangelical and having visions, like rapture stuff.
Mhm.
Are you sure that's not just a mental health crisis?
This is a dentist, scientist kind of thing.
Mhm.
Anyway, I can tell you if you want to hear a great classic, one of my favorite stories, golfing with some friends, and one of the people in my foursome start talking about the clouds for the starter before we even went out on the fairway. And they're talking about all the federal agencies that are involved in why our clouds look the way they look today. Of course, I'm looking at these clouds and I'm not understanding any of it, but I kind of know where this person falls in the spectrum. So when I went home, I'm looking like clouds and conspiracy. I'm trying to find something about the clouds. What in the world does she think the FDA, the FBI, the CIA, Homeland Security, FDA, what are they all doing to the clouds? Couldn't find it. So Thanksgiving dinner comes and I have it with a couple of my Trumpy friends. And I thought at one point I would broach the subject. So I asked just lately, have you heard something about our clouds lately? They pull it up in 5 seconds. The title is Cloud Conspiracy Theory. Cloud Conspiracy Theory. And yet they went on to tell me about all the people seeding our clouds with things. I'm not sure what. Why these golfers don't use umbrellas is beyond me. But that being said, it was very enlightening to me. This has gone well beyond Trump. This has nothing to do with Trump. This is just off the charts conspiracy nonsense, anti-government nonsense. It doesn't even add up anymore. But
It could be it's just exciting to think of these things, to allow your imagination to go. That could be. That's what the cloud thing sounds like to me. You know, we got to come up with something that's going to make our lives more interesting.
And perhaps they need to read, Alice in Wonderland then. It's just,
Yeah, a good novel will get you there, a lot easier.
yeah.
Okay. Cult leaders' power is always reliant on the numbers and enthusiasm of their cult followers. Please describe those attributes a person has before joining that would make them more likely to become a cult follower. Could it be socioeconomic, religious, emotional instability, post-traumatic stress, weak minds, hate, love, domestic desperation? What do you think, Morley? We're going to let you go first on the thing that makes up a person's consciousness that makes him or her likely to become a cult follower. What do you think?
I really do think it's people's need to belong
Okay.
and the need to
Community
feel
then.
they need to feel understood. They need to align themselves with people who they think really care about them. I mean, there can be all of these things, every one of them or one of them, but I think in the big picture, they kind of get caught up in that sense of needing to belong, and they become unawares dependent on it. And it becomes just so much of a part of the structure of their life that they kind of they do lose their sense of self. But I also think, the factor of cognitive dissonance, that psychological theory where we're so exposed to the situation we've put ourselves in that when we have conflicting information, we tend to not accept it and kind of go along with the alternative facts because it supports, it doesn't, it helps eliminate the dissonance. And so I think that's why so many people just hang on to Fox News, because they keep feeding, and keep that dissonance at bay. So I think it's pretty primal psychological stuff. I don't think it's really vast and deeply entrenched. I think it's just part of our human nature. And people just need that comfort, and they find comfort in it. Sadly, it's become an angry form of comfort for some more than not, but
yeah, Doug, piggybacking on what Marilee has said about wanting to belong, it's been a noticeable phenomenon that the people who attend Trump rallies end up hooking up with people they've seen at previous rallies, and it's just like a wonderful reunion for them to get together. And they go to Trump rallies to see their friends that they've seen in previous rallies. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think whatever individual factors made a person need to seek out this belonging or this thing, once they get in it, there's a set of very common factors. And I think being part of a group, and I think a lot of the people who get into these organizations feel pretty powerless and impotent in their own lives. And being part of a group, particularly an angry group, gives one a sense of power. And I think part of what is underestimated in explaining the Trump phenomenon is the pleasure so many people get in being angry. That anger is a positive emotion for lots of people. It gives them a sense of power. I think of it as the Incredible Hulk phenomenon. You got this mild-mannered guy who's just bopping along, no particularly powerful guy. But when he gets angry, his muscles bulge, his clothes rip off because he's so powerful and he just does raw, whatever. That's what I think a lot of people feel when they get caught up in Trumpism. And Trump is a master at keeping people angry. He finds villains everywhere. He finds people to hate everywhere. And he can keep people at a fevered pitch. And when they do it together, it's even more powerful because the effect of a mob is terrific. So I think anger is an absolute primary factor in the Trump phenomenon. And I think you see in so many cults, there's some villainized entity that everybody rallies around. I mean, in religion, it's the devil, right? We wouldn't have much of a religion without a devil. Got to have a devil. And I think it's same for most cults. There's some somebody, whether it's traditional society, government, somebody's evil. And we should be furious, and they've kept us powerless. But now that we're in the know, we're going to be able to change that. And I think that's a lot of the appeal. And it feels good. It feels good. I mean, January 6th looked like a party. I mean, people were having a damn good time tearing apart the Capitol.
Yeah, we're angry and we're fighting to preserve this, and we're going to be damn enthusiastic and passionately happy about engaging in the fight.
Yeah.
Okay, Dan, there's community from Mary Lee and there's anger from Doug. Do you have anything to add?
Well, it's both of them. You don't join an organization or a group or anything understanding that it's a cult unless it's specifically a church. But for some reason that gets overlooked most of the time unless they're really particularly weird church. But I digress. You don't, if you join something and it's weird and you're not getting anything out of it, you tend to leave. So these people don't necessarily have something wrong with them. They're not weak-minded. They're not mentally ill. They're not crazy. They are just lacking something in their lives that they are finding within this group. And a lot of people find community in churches. This is just a really big congregation, for want of a better term. But I stopped listening to it because it got a little weird for me. But I think it was a little bit culty was the podcast. It was a pair of survivors of Nexium, the Keith Raniere cult, who hosted it. And when they ran out of big cults to cover and cult survivors to cover, they moved on to like, oh, bad relationships are just a cult of one. Like, this is where I'm checking off. But the hosts were very clear. Like, if they hadn't been getting something out of Nexium, they would not have stayed. And a lot of other cult media that I consume points out things like multi-level marketing companies or 12-step support programs. Like, they all have those same kinds of behaviors. The members are getting something out of them, and so they stick around. And the ones who leave tend to be the ones who stop getting something out of it. It becomes damaging to them personally, and they recognize that it's causing them harm, and those are the people who jump ship. And I think that the MAGA group is the same. They are getting something out of it. They're getting a sense of community and the opportunity to be angry. Racist uncle at Thanksgiving for years and years and years wasn't allowed to say what he really thinks, and now he's making America great again and gets to use the N-word. So yeah, they're getting something out of it. So what it could be different for each and every one of them. Then you have others like Ashley Babbitt, who were clearly having some kind of psychotic break, and sadly she did not survive that.
I am struck by, and Dan, you segued me perfectly to the next question. I'm struck by the vast number of voters who voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012, who also voted for Trump in 2016 and 2020. MAGA martyr Ashley Babbitt being one example. We should not forget the Bernie Sanders supporters in the 2016 primary who voted for Trump in the 2016 general. Can you explain that, Dan? I'll let you try to explain it since you brought Ashley up.
Okay, well, there's a couple different things going on there. The Bernie people who voted for Trump were not actually supporters of Bernie Sanders. They were supporters of what they perceived as an outsider. And because Bernie did not have a particular political affiliation, although he caucused with the Democrats, the fact that he refused to actually join the party made them think that he was an outsider. Donald Trump was also an outsider. Those people want to burn down the existing system, and they could not see anyone more establishment than Hillary Clinton, who, that is a legitimate criticism. She is a very establishment figure. I fail to see how Bernie Sanders is not, because he's been in Congress since the days of Moses and the Jews fleeing Egypt. But I digress. I think that the Obama Trump voters, I have more difficulty explaining that. But I also don't look at 2016 so much as Donald Trump won, so much as Hillary lost. And I really I don't understand where the Obama Trump voter came from. There had to have been some kind of permission structure given to, hey, instead of the person who's smart and telling us the hard decisions, let's listen to the guy who sells fake Rolexes on the street corner. I bet he's going to be able to fix the electricity in our house instead of the actual electrician, because the actual electrician's going to cost a lot of money and we're going to have to do a lot of work. That's the only way I can explain the Obama Trump voter. I do not get that phenomenon at all. But yeah, I think was definitely going through some kind of mental health crisis, because whenever there's police brutality with a person of color, the first thing all of these people scream is, you have to comply. And she was told by a law enforcement officer pointing a gun at her to stop charging a gate and stop trying to climb through a broken window, and she did not comply. So I think she had something mentally going on in that moment that beyond her normal political affiliation.
Marilee, Dan has no explanation for the Trump Obama voter. Do you?
No, I don't either. And I wasn't aware of the crossover, but given that that's probably a lot of truth to it, the only thing I could think of is that, in fact, Obama was not a real entrenched politician. He's a very cool guy. A lot of suave going for him. He brought a new, different style to the stage. And I think he was very attractive in his own way. And he spoke to the masses. He wasn't an elitist in many respects, but he was able to touch base with a lot of the middle class. And I think people were proud of themselves for being able to elect a person of color to the presidency who they could feel comfortable with. Bernie, I think, was also, a different kind of, clearly he is an entrenched politician, but he's an independent curmudgeon, and he had his own different set of standards that kind of separates him from your usual run of the mill. And I think that's where Trump fell in line as well. But for some, I'm stretching, but my real theory with Trump is that for some reason people like to not elect Hollywood stars, people they know very, very well. If you look at every one of the Republicans, Democrats never put them up. Republicans put them up. They win. They're Ronald Reagan. They're Clint Eastwood, Buddy Bono. I'm very nervous. Steve Garvey's running out here for senator right now in California. These people win. They have to, I think it has more to do, his rise to power has more to do with his celebrity than anything. And I think a lot of people fall for that. So
the word you might have been looking for was charisma. That both Obama and Trump kind of have the charisma that their followers or their voters
they say he does. I get to see it. I see nothing charismatic in that thing. I just
nothing charismatic in Trump is what.
So I couldn't stick it. There was just it just didn't sit with me at all.
Yeah.
But,
okay, Doug.
Well, yeah. A couple thoughts. I think the flip to Obama, even from Obama, is understandable if you realize what, in some ways, an outsider Obama really was. The first black man in a country that's never elected a black president, a guy who came from the background of community organization. And I think that the truth is, it's easier for somebody to flip from being out on the periphery here to out on the periphery there than from either periphery to the middle. And I think you see that historically, that you very seldom see somebody who's been out on the periphery become a moderate, but they can flip to the other end very quickly. I mean, when St. Paul was knocked off his horse by the lightning bolt, out there persecuting those Christians, he didn't get up and say, I think I'll go home and just be a peaceful Jew who minds my own business and deals with. No, no, now I'm going to be a pro-Christian and go the other way. It's the same mindset that
Right.
allows people to be extreme. So I think that's pretty understandable. I think there are people who just want to vote on whoever they see as more away from the mainstream. That's where they'll go. And I think that's,
And who excites their passion.
yeah, because extremisms, people who like that get excited by extreme positions that have no ambiguity, that are absolute. They love it. And that's what gets them going. And I think just before I quit, though, I wanted to point out, Mary Lee had asked about a positive cult. And Dan, you actually alluded to one. Alcoholics Anonymous is a positive cult. It's absolutely cult-like. And I treated a lot of patients over the years who also have been alcoholics. And the ones who left AA but stayed sober were people who say, I got what I needed to get out of AA, but it's too much like a cult. I got to move on with my life. Because you're immersed in, they have their slogans, they have their literature, they have their, if you feel anything unsure of yourself, you call another AA member, you're in a cult. But it happens to be one that for many people is extremely positive.
Yeah, I have a friend who was in AA for a year or so, and he left for that reason, but he's still sober after 40 some years. So that's a good example. Okay, I think there is a need to distinguish the difference between cult followers who are true believers in the messianic entitlement of the leader with power seekers who see the cultish phenomenon as a vehicle to seek and attain personal power. Figures such as Steve Bannon, Mark Meadows, Kevin McCarthy, Kellyanne Conway, Roger Stone, Elise Stefanik, Jared Kushner, Tucker Carlson, etc., have all jumped on the MAGA bandwagon. But is their belief real, or the portrayal of a passion a very convenient opportunity? Doug.
Well, I think I think most of those people are clearly opportunistic. I think they're too smart to buy into it the way most people do. I think they jumped on because they saw tremendous political advantage to it. Now, I do think that sometimes people who do that get caught up in the cult to where they start to become. I think Trump himself kind of believes his own cult now. But I think most of the people if not all the people you listed, I strongly feel were just opportunistic. They saw a chance to get political advancement and financial advancement, whatever, and they jumped on it.
Okay, Dan, true believers or opportunists?
Every single person you named there is a complete opportunist. Remember when Tucker Carlson's text messages got turned over and he hated Trump, can't stand him, was so excited for the Republicans to be done with him and he would never have to talk to him about him again. Now he's on the short list of VP candidates. There is no, that they're completely cynical. Ted Cruz does not actually think the guy who said his father was the JFK assassin and that his wife is ugly is actually the second coming. He does not believe that, but he recognizes the opportunity. Now, I say this knowing that there are actual true believers active in our political process. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she believes it. Lauren Boebert, she believes it. Matt Gaetz totally believes it. Mike Johnson, oh yeah, He absolutely believes it. Like that there are a bunch of true believers out there, like indoctrinated in the cult. They're in, except for Carrie Lake, who is a qualified loser and just cannot win an election no matter what. These people are actually succeeding and rising through the ranks in the cult and have achieved actual power through it, and they do believe. But there are a lot more of the operatives that we saw during the first Trump term are more political opportunists who just recognize that they're taking advantage of the situation. Like Mark Meadows, I think it was during Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony where she said that he said, "Oh my God, we're all going to prison," as soon as Trump started doing everything he was doing on January 6th. That the opportunists are well aware, but their political brands are they have to go down with the ship. They've sunk their cost into this. Like Nikki Haley has successfully broken away. Chris Christie has successfully broken away. Um, I don't think they have a future in this Republican Party, but we'll see what they look like, what it looks like in 2028, especially if Trump loses this year. But for most of these people can't break away. They have sunk too deep. Kellyanne Conway gave up her marriage for Donald Trump, and she wasn't even sleeping with him that we know of. I think she's too. I think she's too old for him. She had graduated high school, but there's definitely people were willing to make sacrifices, and now they have to reap the benefits of it. So they've hitched their wagon completely to Trump, so they can't break away. They're ones who could get out, who understood what was going on, did get out already.
Marilee, I want to add a little additional question to this particular topic, and that is whether it's a true believer or an opportunist. Which do you think is the most dangerous, the true believer or the opportunist?
Well, the opportunists have done the most harm to our country because they've been in the position to do the most good, to have stopped it, and they never did, except for Mike Pence. So I think they are by far, because every one of those people were in a position of authority and had the ability to do more and to be more outspoken, but no, they chose to lie to their constituents, to their on TV, on the podcast, on Fox. It's a tragedy. Part of me thinks that they believed in what they were doing in some fashion. I'm not sure what the end game was. I have yet to figure out what the end game of Trump's administration was, because I
think their belief was that their power was important to them.
Nothing.
Yeah. Well,
in terms of administration, other than the tax bill, their accomplishments were certainly not anything I'm aware of. So what was the plan? And why did they keep channeling all this to this ultimate destruction? So yes, to your question, I think the opportunists by far
more dangerous.
Far more dangerous.